441 games were successfully crowdfunded in 2024, Kickstarter's best year ever. Meanwhile, publishers gave us 30 remasters and remakes. Of course they did. What's happening today is we, the players, are literally funding the games that publishers won't make. The games we clearly want are just being made without them, while they pump another couple $100 million into the safest possible option. If you ever needed proof that publishers are completely out of touch with what a good game actually is, just look at what they rejected. Swen Vincke pitched old school RPGs to publishers for 15 years. Every single pitch was refused. Publishers even forced Larian to cut multiplayer features in past projects because of cost concerns. So Larian basically said sod that, they self-funded, they ran a Kickstarter for Divinity Original Sin, and they raised just under $1 million from 19,000 backers. They finally built the game their way, and it became the #1 bestseller on Steam at launch, with 160,000 copies sold in its first week. But sure, there's no market for old school RPGs. Obsidian nearly shut down in 2012 because no publisher would fund an isometric RPG in the Baldur's Gate style. It was commercially obsolete, they said. So Obsidian turned to Kickstarter with Project Eternity and raised $4 million from 73,000 backers. They hit their funding goal in just 27 hours. The game that was commercially obsolete literally saved the studio from closure and sold almost 1 million copies in its first year. Brian Fargo, one of the original creators of Fallout, spent 20 years pitching Wasteland 2 to publishers. 20 years. Every single one said no. We already have one of those, they said. We don't want old IP. Then he asked the players directly on Kickstarter and raised 3 million quid in a month from 60,000 backers. Publishers rejected a game for 2 decades that we funded in 4 weeks. It then went on to be the Steam top seller and PC World's Game of the Year in 2014. Then there's Kingdom Come Deliverance. Warhorse spent a year pitching a medieval RPG based on actual history. Publishers kept telling them, people want dragons, not history. The game is too niche, we need magic. Some apparently even suggested making it a free-to-play MMO instead, because nothing says medieval realism like microtransactions for virtual armor. Warhorse went to Kickstarter, they raised over $1 million from 35,000 backers, and the game sold 3 million copies. All of these games went on to be massive successes, both critically and commercially, and it turns out that when you let developers make what they actually want to make, without corporate committees second-guessing every decision, good things happen. Mental concept. But here's where it gets properly interesting. So a 2025 GDC survey of 3,000 game developers found that 56% of them now self-fund their own projects. That's double the rate of publisher deals. Publishers spent decades positioning themselves as essential gatekeepers, the wise old guardians who knew what would sell and what wouldn't. And it turns out when you remove the gate entirely, actual good games get through. Who would have thought? And meanwhile, Kickstarter alone saw $2.6 billion pledged to games projects, with 441 successfully funded in 2024, the strongest year ever. Now, of course, this all makes perfect sense. We actually know what we want. Publishers are just corporate clowns in suits focused on revenue, spreadsheets, and the latest buzzword mechanics. They'll tell you there's no market for turn-based RPGs while backing another live service shooter complete with 450 new skins that will be dead in 6 months. Absolutely clueless. But the real embarrassment, while they're obsessing over these massive budgets and safe bets, the actual success stories are just happening without them. Among Us, developed by 3 people, had 500 million players. That's roughly 125 million players per developer. Zero marketing budget, zero publisher backing, just a simple social deduction game that caught fire because it was brilliant and different. And meanwhile, you've got Sony spending $300 million on Spider-Man 2, needing to sell 7.2 million copies at full price just to break even. That's roughly 1 in 7 PS5 owners buying the game just to not lose money. Think of how many of these indie games could have been made with that same budget. But it's not just Among Us. Papers, Please, one person, Lucas Pope, made a game about checking passports that sold 5 million copies. Balatro, local thunk working alone, turned profitable within the first hour of the game releasing, and it's now sold 5 million copies. Hades, Supergiant Games with 20 people, 7.7 million copies and over $130 million in revenue. Cuphead, two brothers who remortgaged their houses, built a team and sold 5 million copies of a hand-drawn masterpiece. Or Schedule 1 more recently, solo developer, a game about selling naughty substances, sold 8 million copies as of today. So what they clearly still don't understand is that budget is irrelevant. The success comes from innovation, from quality, from making an incredible experience. It doesn't matter if it costs 10 quid or 10 billion. Quality and innovation will always win. We don't care about how much it costs to develop, we just care if your game is good. So what are the big publishers doing instead? Well, they gave us over 30 remasters and remakes in 2024 alone. Days Gone Remastered came out this year too. The original came out in 2019, 6 years ago. I hadn't even got around to playing it yet, and now there's a remaster. They're remastering games that aren't even old enough to drink. And it's not just remasters, it's sequels. Assassin's Creed now has 31 games. Call of Duty has released 23 titles since 2003. FIFA's been releasing annually since 1993. It's not a coincidence we get a new FIFA, a new COD, and a new Assassin's Creed every single year. It's because they know they can bank on it. They know it will sell regardless. It keeps them afloat. Because here's where the real madness starts. AAA budgets have exploded. We're talking hundreds of millions for an average game. GTA 6 is looking at close to $1 billion. That's more than double the GDP of Tonga. Bit mental when you think about it. So when you're risking that kind of money, you don't take risks. So what do we get? Sequels, remasters, and safe bets. They're playing it so safe that they're killing innovation before it even starts, because innovation is unpredictable. It can't be focus grouped or market tested into guaranteed success, so they don't even try, which is why literally all of the innovation in gaming these days comes from indie teams who don't have shareholders breathing down their necks about quarterly earnings and can just focus on making something great. So what happens when actual talented developers see this? Because believe it or not, they do still exist at AAA studios. They make their own choices. They leave. It's a proper brain drain happening, and it's creating a vicious cycle. AAA loses talent, gets worse, more talent leaves, but it's also directly fueling the indie revolution we're seeing today. It comes as no surprise, but Expedition 33 is my game of the year, and Guillaume Broche, he left Ubisoft because he was bored. Not because they treated him badly, just bored of what he was doing. He wanted to make an original JRPG, but getting approval for a new IP at a big studio would have taken 25 years. His words. So he left. He formed Sandfall Interactive with 30 developers and made Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It was the highest rated game of 2025. It sold 3.3 million copies in 33 days. Hideo Kojima left Konami after years of creative interference. He formed Kojima Productions as an independent studio, made Death Stranding, sold over 5 million copies, went on to make Death Stranding 2, another huge success, which some even claim to be the 2025 game of the year. And just FYI, they're wrong. And Jonathan Blow spent $200,000 of his own money over 3 years making Braid, made him a millionaire. He used those profits to fund his next game, The Witness. Complete creative freedom, no publisher interference, no quarterly earnings pressure. And every time someone talented walks out that door, they take their creativity with them. Meanwhile, the corporate machine just gets a little bit worse, a little bit more risk averse, a little bit more afraid to try anything new. Publishers have literally become victims of their own success. They got so big, so risk averse, so obsessed with chasing trends and cash that they forgot how to spot a good game when it's literally in front of them. So developers and players just went around them, built their own funding, their own distribution, their own communities, and it's working massively. They spent decades positioning themselves as the essential middleman, and it turns out the best thing about a middleman is you can just cut them out entirely. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate each and every one of you. Please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and also share the video to help get the word out there. It all really helps the channel massively. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.